Welcome back to the Fireside Lit Book Club, a quiet, candlelit corner of the internet where we read slowly, think deeply, and speak authentically about our experiences. I'm Lindsay, and I invite you to join me by the fire as we explore the soul of a book, the beauty it reveals, the questions it asks, and the ways it helps us understand life, identity, and meaning just a little more clearly. I took a detour and decided to record this episode ahead of one that I had already planned because I was blown away after finishing this book. Today we are talking all about Life of Pi, a book that looks like a story about shipwreck and survival, but really it's about something so much deeper. And this is why it has been really at the forefront of my mind since I closed the book for the last time last night. I did not anticipate the complexity of it, the layers to it, really at all. I put off reading this book for a long time, despite its hype, simply because the premise didn't look much like something I would pick up on my own. I'm not crazy about the whole shipwreck theme. I loved the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, but it still wouldn't be like my first pick. It's not the genre that I'm drawn to. So really all I knew about this book was that it involved a shipwrecked boy, or I should say a castaway type of situation, stranded on a boat with a tiger. And I was kind of like, interesting potentially, but not my number one pick. Anyway, I came to this book just kind of on a whim, decided that it was something I could throw in my TBR list this year. And I am so glad, you guys, that I picked it up. I cannot rave about this book enough. This book is about faith, truth, and the courage to live in a both and mentality instead of either or. And this is a concept that has fascinated me probably for the better part of a year. I think I've mentioned here before, I was born and raised in a very conservative, devout Catholic background. And within that framework, you are very much taught that religion is set. You follow the rules of one religion. And if you follow them to the best of your ability all the time, you can call yourself a practicing whatever, practicing Catholic, practicing Jew, practicing Muslim. And if you don't follow them to the T, you are what Catholics tend to refer to, what devout Catholics tend to refer to as a cafeteria Catholic. So I grew up very much understanding that the church teaches what it teaches, and that's the end of it. Like, you can, quote, question things, but if you have a different opinion or thought process about something the church teaches to be definite and immutable, you're not really permitted to be vocal about that. You're not permitted to think of it as anything other than a literal interpretation. You must believe everything that the church puts out on faith and morals. It's not up for interpretation or debate. So this question of both and, really I came upon it and developed a fuller understanding of it only, in the last year. I have been kind of doing a bit of a deep dive into mysticism, which I believe gets to the heart of religion in a very unadulterated, untainted way. Maybe I kind of imagine mysticism to be what religion should look like without the power, without the corruption, without the greed of these institutions that kind of gatekeep and set the hoops, honestly, that you have to jump through of who has access to God. And again, like this either or mentality of like either you comply completely with what the church teaches or you're a heretic, and there's no in between. And I just think this boils down to a very narrow understanding of who God is, of what he wants for us in our lives. I think, yes, churches and religion structured, organized religion has the potential to be good in that it sets up a secure base for a lot of kids, especially as they're growing up. If it is taught in such a way that it doesn't shame them, it doesn't shrink their worldview. But unfortunately, that's not the way a lot of super religious people operate. And if you're very religious listening to this, absolutely no offense to you. You could be living your faith in a way that's absolutely beautiful and authentic and really promotes a climate of peace and tranquility for you in your life. Acceptance, compassion, all of those things that we would hope something as transcendent as religion would offer. But for a lot of people, religion is a source of shame. And we're kind of taught to believe that we are bad unless we comply with all these things that an organized religion teaches. And within the Catholic framework anyway, if you don't, there is the sacrament of confession, which, okay, if you go, you're absolved of your sins, and then, you resolve to sin no more, you go about your merry way, and you try again to be the best Catholic you can be. The issue with this is that it very much does enforce this either or mentality of like, you break a doctrine, you have to go to confession for forgiveness for that. Even if you don't actually feel sorry for it in your heart, that's the only way you can be reconciled with God and the church. And I find that to be really problematic. And I never really let myself feel that completely until I've kind of gone through this process of, what do they call it, deconstruction. And again, that's something that I've only recently been working toward, and kind of just actively challenging some of these views and beliefs and practices that I've had forever. And so that's why, to me, Life of Pi just really affected me in profound and unexpected ways, because I had heard this book kind of touched on themes of religion. Little did I know how much, but I was not prepared for what came. What I experienced was a bit like the Chronicles of Narnia, with all the animals and the fantasy elements, the surreal elements, but in a much less Christian-focused way and in a much more God-centric way, which to me was a lot less on the nose and a lot more thought-provoking and effective. So let me get into a little bit about what the book is and just what its kind of main themes are. I've obviously touched on a lot of it. But the main character, Pi Patel, we get this kind of, maybe like a 50-page introduction to his life in India, his upbringing, his connection to two things in particular. Zoology, which his father runs a local zoo in India, and religion, which he comes from a family that is not religious at all. They're very secular, quote, forward-thinking people. And his parents are a bit perplexed when their son starts turning to all of these different religions in a major way, to the point that like all of these local churches and pastors and imams and like all of these religious leaders know who he is and are shocked when they all discover that he is a practicing Christian, Muslim, and Hindu at the same time. And there's this moment in the book where these three religious leaders approach him when he's out with his family, and they're like, oh, like, you're such a good Hindu boy. And the imam is like, oh, you're such a good Muslim boy. And the pastor is like, oh, you're such a good Christian boy. And then these religious leaders look at each other and they're like, no, like, you must misunderstand. This is Pi Patel. He's a Christian, or he's a Muslim, or he's a Hindu. And they get into like this big brawl about who Pi is and what his religion is. And Pi's profound statement, his profound response to all of this controversy is, I just want to love God. That's it. That's his whole argument. He's not trying to blend religions together in some rebellion. He just refuses to shut the door on mystery. And again, I think one of the best things about religion is that it opens the door to mystery. And mystery is so good because it reminds us that there is something beyond us. It's whether you are an all science person or an all religious person, you don't give much credence maybe to the popular, scientific theories. I think we can all agree that it is that something beyond, that thought of transcendence that makes life more meaningful, whatever that looks like for you. That is the mystery of living. And that's really what the heart of this book tries to get to. So think about that for a second. What if the different languages of faith, whether it's prayer beads or rosaries, hymns, bowing, incense, aren't enemies competing against each other, but windows? And what if each shows us a different face of the same God? I think that's such a beautiful concept. And again, it gets back to the heart of this question of both and. And that's ultimately the turn that the book takes. We are swept away with Pi in this great adventure where we don't know if he's going to live or die. He is stranded on this boat after his ship to Canada sinks. He's on this ship with his family, immigrating to Canada from India, and the ship unexpectedly sinks, and he finds himself in this lifeboat with a tiger, an orangutan, a zebra, and a hyena. And we get this storyline of violence, extreme violence, and survival, on the sea. And at the end of the book, and this is a spoiler, so if you don't want a spoiler, maybe pause the episode and come back to it once you have read the book or seen the movie. But at the end of the book, Pi does make it back to land, civilization, and he's being interviewed by these Japanese officials because the ship that went down is a Japanese ship liner. And they're asking him questions about what happened, what he remembers, how he survived. And he tells the story that we've been swept away on for the last 300 pages, which is how he ended up on this lifeboat with all these animals. And ultimately, it just became a story about him and the tiger and surviving not only the elements, but in this boat with the tiger for 7 months. And the officials are stunned by this. They're like, well, that can't be the truth. Come on, give us the real version, give us the real version. And Pi insists for a time that it is the real version, and then gets exceedingly annoyed and is like, okay, I'll give you an alternative story. And he retells the same story, but instead of animal insertions, we get insertions of people. And the same elements of violence, survival, all of that is still there. It's just a much more truncated version, and we lose a lot of the beauty that came from the version with the animals. We lose a lot of the hope, I would almost say, the wonder, the awe. And the officials at first are like, okay, yeah, like logically, that makes a lot more sense, but that's a horrible story. And Pi is like, all right, well, let me ask you, like, which story do you prefer? And the officials kind of look at each other and they're like, well, the version with the animals. And this is Pi's point. Both stories are true. This is the brilliance of it. One is fact, one is what actually happened, and one conveys the meaning of his experience. One shows us the human brutality of suffering, while the other shows us the power of faith, imagination, and wonder. So, do we really need to choose, or can we let both live inside us at the same time? And that's the invitation of Life of Pi. Spirituality doesn't have to be either or. It can be both and. God in Hindu chants, God in the Eucharist, God in the Muslim call to prayer. Both the brutal reality of survival and the beauty of myth. Faith isn't about locking ourselves into certainty and rejecting everything else that doesn't fit into that neat, tidy box. That's not where God lives. God lives everywhere. He's greater than everything. And even if you just believe that God is perfect love, which guess what? He is. If you believe in love, you believe in God because you believe in something beyond yourself. And that's about, it's about holding the paradox with open hands. That's it. If you can live with uncertainty and questions and doubts and also hold at the same time hope and truth and love and meaning, you already believe in God. You can be an atheist by your own definition. If you don't want to believe in a white man who lives up in the sky with a long beard, that's fine. That's likely not who God is anyway. It is one very specific, stereotypical version of God. But all you have to do is be open to these paradoxes, to believe in meaning beyond yourself, to believe in something greater than yourself. So maybe the real question isn't which story is true in Life of Pi. Maybe the question is, which story gives you life? Thanks so much for listening today. I would love to hear how Life of Pi challenged your own ideas of faith and truth. So if you are interested in having that discussion and you've read the book or seen the movie even, please leave your thoughts in the comment section. And until next time, may you have the courage to live into both and.